So good morning, Rotaractors, Rotarians, everyone on the call. Thank you for joining the breakout session. My name is Joanna Spencer. I'm the current president of the Rotary Club of Antigua. I was a Rotaractor many years ago, maybe like 7 years ago, and I would have served as a president. I would have also served on the district team as well. I would have been a treasurer, director, secretary. I think I've practically held every role in Rotaract. I've attended many district conferences. I think that was one of the highlights of me being a Rotaractor. And I think in my very first year, I would have joined on and attended a conference. And that is what really cemented my love for Rotaract. So I'm encouraging persons, if you have not registered for the conference in Barbados and there's still time, please do so, because that is where your real passion and love for Rotaract will stem from. I'm happy to see so many faces today on this call, my old Rotaractors who are now Rotarians and leaders in the club. This morning, I will be presenting on two topics. The overall topic will be on leadership, but I'll then first take an angle of leadership in Rotary, Rotaract or service organization, and then Rotary leadership in the workplace. In my position as a leader, I would have been the CEO for Digicel. I would have recently left that in order to join the entrepreneurial world after 10 years of being in that sort of industry. So I think overall, based on my experience, I'm quite fitting to speak about leadership, especially as a young leader. I'm currently 36 years of age, and I've held a lot of leadership positions. So I really want to inspire young persons in this group to also know that you too can be leaders in your respective organizations or service organizations. Please feel free to drop any questions you may have in the chat box, and I will answer them at the end of the presentation. So this morning I heard Rotarian Sonia say something. She said, sometimes we place a square peg in a round hole. Now that really stood out for me, because a lot of times there are a lot of persons who have potential to be leaders, but when you put them into certain positions, they fail dramatically. So it is very important to identify if you are a square peg in a round hole, you should admit to it. Like, for instance, you were promoted to a particular role, or you were promoted to be a director or president or chair for a project. And this is really not your strength. You may have taken a little bit more, chewed off a little bit more than you really can take. And you as an individual should always come to grips and realization and be true to yourself that maybe this particular task role is not for me, and perhaps you should step down. Now, it is important in Rotary and Rotaract to identify leaders. Sometimes we have persons coming into the club and we put them on a project, or you see them performing, you see them actively coming to meetings, they're participating, they want to serve. We should always from the onset identify those persons as leaders and give them the necessary skills to, grow into future leaders. Because what I'm noticing in our organizations is that persons aren't willing to step up. Nobody wants to be president. Nobody wants to be a director. Nobody wants to give the full commitment, either because they're not aware of what it may really involve, or maybe they are aware, but they just don't want to commit. I think when you have a good team, taking on any position is really easy, whether or not you're knowledgeable, whether or not you have the time. But if you have a good team, they are the ones that really support you. Another thing, when I look at leadership, I think, are leaders born, or is it something that's learned? For me, I think people are born with a certain leadership ability. Think about when you see young children, some of them are very bold, some of them will take the lead. You'll have a smaller child pulling a bigger child and taking the forefront. Some of them aren't afraid to get up on the stage and sing, dance, whatever the case. And I think those are the little attributes that you identify to see whether or not someone has the ability to lead or have characteristics to lead. But I also do think leadership is something that can be developed. You can learn how to become a better leader, but I do think you should have some of it's where you were born with, but you can always develop. And leadership is very twofold. Some people get the concept of leadership confused with the concept of a manager, and they're two different things. Leaders inspire. Leaders bring people along the way. Leaders do not dictate, okay? Now, leadership in Rotary for me is being more than the president. So yes, I am the president of my club, but one, I have a board. Two, there are other members who are maybe even more capable than I am, but maybe I was the chosen one. For me, leadership is a member that is stepping up to chair a project. It is a member who uses their influence or their connections to get a sponsorship for a project. It is a senior member of a club giving guidance because they've been there, they've done that, and they can inspire and teach others. Leadership in a Rotary organization takes commitment. Before you sign on to be a leader, taking up any project, chairing any project, being a director, you need to ensure your behavior supports your own action. And when I say behavior supports your own action, I mean, will you be there? Will you be there at your projects? Will you be there at a project that finishes and everyone is gone and you have to stay back? Will you be there ensuring that you are always present? If not present, you're delegating. Will you be there? Would you be able to commit your time and energy to doing this particular thing that you would have taken up for that period? Communication. I think one of the things that happens in Rotary, sometimes we do not communicate. Sometimes we have a situation where a board sits, they meet, all the information is shared among board members, sometimes even the president and maybe his secretary, and they don't delegate, they don't share information to the wider club. Rotary is a non-profit organization, and there's no one in the club that has more power than any other person. Even board meetings, at board meetings, any member of a club can attend the board meeting. They may not be able to make a decision at the board meeting, but they can for sure voice their opinion. So it is critical that as the leader of the club, you keep your members abreast of everything that is happening, not just what is happening, but why is it happening, or why is it important that the club embarks on a particular thing. Sometimes a president comes up with projects. Now, for example, in my Rotary Club, every year the president, we have a selection 2 years ahead. So a president for 2024 already knows who they are going to be. So they can already start preparing for the year. The president comes on and the president has a list of projects in which they would like to execute. Sometimes there's no involvement from the club as to projects that they think would be beneficial. Sometimes there's a situation where there's no continuity. Maybe one president did it in the year before, and this new president may not be interested in the project. So what we've tried to do over the last 2 or 3 years is to ensure that projects that a president comes up with, there's some involvement from club members. So the club members are able to throw out ideas in which, you know, they think could be beneficial, and not just a president dictating, this is what I want for my year, or this is not what I want to continue. Now, for me personally, when I took up the presidency, I would have done a lot of round robin in terms of ideas of where we need to put our energy into, what communities need our help, trying to get a little bit more on the streets. We have different groups of members who may have access to different information. So the communication really flowed. I would have asked them what projects you think we could do. We also look at why we think we should be doing it. We looked at current affairs, and we also looked at the importance. So when I would have presented my projects to the club that year, everybody felt a sense of involvement. Persons were also able to give feedback as to, you know, maybe we shouldn't look at this because maybe another service organization isn't doing this and there's too much focus around that. Maybe something else is important. And then they also would be able to understand, why is it important for us to do the project? And I think when you take steps like that and involve people more in a process as opposed to dictating, this is what I'm going to do, you get a buy-in. And when the projects do roll around, you get more participation in the project. Another thing that is important as a leader in service organization is collaboration, getting the members involved, getting them involved in the planning and the decision making. So again, collaboration, when we tell the members what the project is about, they get a sense of, being a part of it. They more want to work on the committee. One thing that my club has done that works pretty well is every member that comes into the club has to be assigned to a committee, and every member in general will be assigned to the committee, and we rotate it annually, because sometimes what I find, okay, if I'm an accountant, when I come into the club, the first committee they're going to put me on is fundraising or treasury. But maybe that's not my passion. Maybe that's not why I came into the club. I do that for work. But when I come to the club, I want to do community service. Maybe I'm very good at looking at foundation. I love the foundation and I want to work on the foundation committee. So it is also important to understand your members' wants, your members' needs, why they're in the club, to ensure that it is beneficial. Though that person's skill set may be best in the finance or treasury, but they can support it. Right? You don't have to force them there, because when you do that, now you're making them less committed, you're making them less wanting to step up to the mantle. Getting them involved in the decision making, you can assign them to a committee and you can assign them to a chairperson of a project. Not because you are the president of the club means that you should be the one always fronting at the forefront of a project, always doing the interviews, always doing a presentation. Let the other members step up and do so. You have to also partner with other service organizations. So being a leader also says, hey, let's come together. Let's work with another service club to make this project or this issue more impactful by joining forces. Now, just some things that I want to say from me as a leader and what I've learned well is, don't get involved in the politics of the club and always remain neutral. Always keep yourself on the ground. Be connected with every member of the organization. Be empathetic. Sometimes you see a member, they're not showing up to meetings. Give them a call. You have an event and you realize that, hey, the turnout for the last one was poor. Start taking up your phone, making calls. Be a little bit more personable. A member is sick, a family member is sick, checking on them, do a home visit. There's a funeral, show up for the funeral, organize for the club members to attend the funeral, birthdays, celebrate birthdays, recognize members when they do something good in their respective industries, recognize their children when they have high achievement. These sort of things, being a leader really makes you stand out, in my opinion, when you are not just about getting a job done, but you also have an interest in each and every one of your members. And also living by that four-way test and practicing it. And every decision you make, ensuring that the four-way test takes forefront of what you're doing. Now, another key thing is preparing people for presidency. If you see members that are in your club that have also leadership potential, bring them along the way. Work closely with them, understand, what are their future plans for the club. And for me, being a president doesn't mean that you should have been in the club how many years, or it's whomever hasn't been the president yet, that's their turn next. It's really looking for people who stand out, people who are willing to serve, people who are committed, people who have the time. Rotary is not something that it's paid. The payment you receive is way more valuable than any money, but you also have to know that yes, somebody may have a leadership potential, but maybe their current job that pays them doesn't allow them to commit. But even though it doesn't allow them to commit, doesn't mean that they are not willing to basically step up and do things that could really drive the club forward. Another thing that's really good is to have a new member project in your club. I think here you can really develop leaders. When you have new Rotarians or Rotaractors joining the club, they join for a reason and they may have ideas that they would like to also execute. Allow them to come together and execute a new member project. I found that doing that, I was able to see who I could potentially choose to chair a committee project in the future. I could see who we could put as a director. I could see who we could put as a president in the near future and start grooming them. So for me, those are some things in which I would, think that would make you an effective leader in the club. Key things are you don't have to be a president to be a leader. Anyone can be a leader in their own respective way. And it's always important to step up, ensure that you show your commitment, you communicate, you collaborate, you ask questions. And I think these things would really drive a club forward significantly. Now, I have another topic to comment on, which is leadership in the workplace. But I'm wondering, should we take questions for leadership in Rotary, or should we leave it all the way to the end? If you could just drop your suggestion in the chat. Okay, I do see a question. Maybe I can just answer. I see, in your leadership role, what major challenges have you faced and how were you able to overcome it? As a Rotarian, I can't say I've had major challenges internally, other than maybe the club support. Our club historically has had an issue where we don't have a lot of people participating in projects. It's normally one core group participating. But it sort of demotivates me at times, because I'm thinking, hey, you guys signed up to this project. We came on fresh for the year. Everybody pledged that they will support. But support comes in many ways. And I kind of learn to accept that, hey, this is the core group. This is something that's been happening way before I was president. There's just one small group that does all the work and the others don't. But what I've learned in just talking to senior Rotarians, they did their work in their time. They've been in the club for 20 years. There was a time when they were really committed. They were really high energy, and they just want to take that back seat. They do support. They support by, being mentors. They support financially by financing the projects when you really need somebody to help. They contribute to the club. They show up at the meetings. But when it comes to projects, they're past that stage. So what you do with those sort of people, you find other roles for them. That they know about the social life. So when we have social activities, you see them coming out. So you engage them there and you just use them for their knowledge, as opposed to expect them to be doing the work. So as a president, you look for people who are working hard, that core group, you treat them really well, you keep them engaged, you keep them rewarded, you keep them recognized, and you also then try to recruit more people who are trying to do work and want to work. But you don't bash them that, hey, you don't participate in project. For me, that works pretty well. And I continue to execute my projects with my core group, because I know those are my workhorses, and they will die for Rotary, whatever way possible. I don't see any more questions around this topic, but if you do have, you can put them in the box. I will jump into my second half, which is more leadership in the workplace. And I think some of the values of Rotary and your leadership ability in the workplace and Rotary, they work hands in hands, and you really see yourself doing things differently. Now, sometimes I see, a Rotarian, and I think, boy, if this is the way you operate at Rotary, I can't understand, how do you lead your organization? You never seem organized, you're never on time, you don't show up. So how in heavens are you the CEO of this company, or how are you the owner of this company? And sometimes we have to go back to basics. And when I lead in my old role, I always remember the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Is it beneficial to all concerned? And everything that I do, every decision I make, everything that comes out my mouth, I always have the 4-way tests in the back of my mind. So I think it gives great, it gives me a good foundation to lead. Now, when I think of leadership in the workplace, I think of 3 things that happen naturally: friction, confusion, underperformance. But what does not happen naturally? Leadership. Sometimes we see people in position and we think, how did they get their job? They're not leaders. They're not setting a good example. But for me, I always try to lead from the front. I always remember those principles, again, that I spoke about in the club: communication, commitment. If I say I am the CEO of the company, I have a commitment to the staff, I have a commitment to the shareholders, I have a commitment to the board, and I have to lead. So if I have a report to do, and it depends on 4 other persons, and somebody has dropped the ball, it still needs to be done. So I am a leader, I have to jump in and find a way to get my hands dirty and get that job done. Now, for me, when I was in my last role in those posts, I was a very involved team player. Not because I am the CEO doesn't mean that I should do this or that. I knew every department. I knew what most persons did. I knew how the retail stores operated. I knew their challenges because what? I went on the front line. I put on my uniform one day. I let the store manager give me a float. She put me on the register and I worked like if I was a normal employee. And at the end of the day, one, my colleagues were able to have a greater respect for me. Two, I was able to have a great respect and appreciation for what they did. Number two. Three, I was able to understand the customers better. I was able to understand the importance of relationship building, being flexible as a leader, giving my managers the ability to make certain decisions on the front line without always having to channel back up to me. And I also learned the challenges they had in the system. Now, from that experience, I was able to, one, make quick changes for them. Two, make their lives easier. Three, give the store managers an ability to, give more credit if there's an issue without, coming up to me to ask me every question, and really understanding their challenges and recognize them a little better. And I did that for technically all of my departments. I even went on the street. It was digital, so we, had launch cable, and I went out with an installation to understand what was involved in the process, the challenges. I would have gone on a service call to see why customers kept complaining that, either we're thieving their internet or their data was running out too fast. I was able to see what was happening. And then with that information, I was able to go back to my chairman and make changes of how we could improve. But I think if, as a manager, a leader, you don't get down to basic, I don't think you'll be able to ever understand your customers. I don't think you'll ever be able to really understand your staff or get the respect from them to go above and beyond. Now, for me, there are many types of leaders in an organization, and I think different leaders are needed for different things. Based on different industries, you need that leader who is a manager. You need a leader who is more empathetic. You need a leader who gets things done. You need a leader who is more involved. So I think it's critical to ensure that you understand that it is important. Everybody has their own thing to carry. Now, just like Rotary, where being the president doesn't mean that you are the leader, being a department manager is a leader. Being responsible for a particular task is a leader. Doing your job, because that is your task. That is why you were hired, is being a leader in your own respective area. And I think when you have certain employees that demonstrate that leadership capability, willing to go above and beyond, caring about their other colleagues, not always complaining. Sometimes everybody, nobody's happy with their salary, but you signed up for it. They'll say, I'm not being paid enough. But that's what you signed up to. You signed that contract. You knew that is what the job was paying, and you chose to do it, whether or not, it was a situation where you needed the money, you didn't have another option. When you sign up for that, you need to be a leader in that role. You need to come, give your best foot every day. Because I'll tell you this, when I got my very first job, I came back home after university. I basically said, let me see what the salaries are out there. And I'm like, my God, I can't believe average person was working for $4,000 EC a month. And I got this interview and I said, they asked me, what is your salary expectation? And I said, well, in my last job, I'm getting $5,000. I bumped up myself a little bit there. And they said, okay, no problem. When they gave me the offer, they offered me $6,000. I thought I've been good, I've been good for my job. And then when I got in, I realized the average pay for that particular role was about $12,000. I felt cheated. But you know what? My job, I signed up to it, I agreed to it, and I gave my best foot forward. And I worked harder than everyone who was making the amount. And somebody would have seen my attitude. They knew that I knew what the real pay was because I had access to everyone's salary. And I worked like if I was getting more. And they saw something in me and they would have promoted me. And I'm telling you, every year for 10 years, I was promoted every 2 years because what? They saw some leadership capability in me. I encourage you young Rotarians and Rotaractors to be leaders in your own respective area. The right attitude, the right aptitude will make you go places. You don't have to be the CEO, you don't have to be the manager. A lot of persons are more capable and more of leaders than their manager, the way they operate, the way they communicate. So do not allow age, do not allow money, do not allow other people to get in your way of what you want. Some of us don't want to be leaders. A lot of persons don't want to step up. And we should respect people like that. Everyone does not want that position. They don't want that front line. I always remember the saying that guides me through. Heavy is he who wears the crown. For me, when you take that crown up, it's a whole different ball game. When you become a leader, you lose friends. It is like parenting. People look at you differently. The focus is on you. They expect you to inspire. They expect you to perform. And you're an individual. You go through your own feelings. You have mood swings like them. You have bad days. You have good days. But everybody expects you to still get up and show up. Always keep people informed as a leader. Show empathy. Get involved in what people do. Understand what they do. Respect their respective roles. Respect their personal time. Listen to them. Coach them. Develop them. Recognize them. Never get caught up in power and position. That position can easily be removed from you any day. Do not always take the front line or feel you need to represent. Develop your staff. Never talk down senior management with any other senior manager or staff. Never talk down your direct report in front of another person who is your direct report. Understand your staff, invest in them. Use personality tests to get deeper understanding of how they communicate, how they operate, what are their aspirations. Execute a 360-degree assessment on yourself, on your staff. Understand how people view you. It's always three sides: what you think of yourself, what other people think of you, and the reality of who you really are. Address problems head on and do not allow non-performance who you ignore to corrupt or demotivate other high performers. And on that note, I bring my presentation to an end, as I think I have reached my time, and we go to the questions.
Yes, so Rotarian Spencer, thank you so very much for this insightful presentation. As we are about to conclude, I have two questions for you.
Correct.
One being, earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that it is often the case that no one wants to take up roles and run for president or director, etc. This is a problem in my club currently. Do you have any suggestions to encourage persons to step forward?
Yes, so what we need to do is to look at a more succession planning. I don't think we should wait until the December before to start electing somebody for June. I think I like the Rotary way because it prepares someone. So we look ahead, we look at persons who could potentially be leaders, and you start poaching them from early, right? When you start poaching them from early, normally people don't want to step up for leadership because one, they don't think they're going to do a good job. Two, they may think that they don't have enough time. Now, I think it's important that a past president, for Rotary, we have a presidential committee where we do elections, and we start looking at people from 2 years in advance, and we say, we're going to get you ready for presidency. And they say, oh, not this year, next year, put me in the second year. And then you can easily coach them for the next year to get ready. So I think when we put the pressure on the person at the very last time to say, let's put up the person for president, they get fearful. They think that, I don't know what's going to happen to me in that period, and I don't want to do it. So I think one, scouting people out in advance, really helps. It's a problem in my club too, but when we visited somebody 2 years ago, they said, I don't think I'm ready this year, but 2 years down the line, they were ready and they did an excellent job. So I think preparation, letting them know that they're going to have a good team, having them pick their team to know who they will work with and know that it's not all about you, to me, that helps.
Thank you very much for that insightful comment there. Sorry. The second question we have is, how can you break through old habits as a new member in a club that you want to shine in?
Okay, so I joined my Rotary Club just 5 years ago. They were very set in their ways, still set in their ways, but luckily for me, I can't speak from a new member perspective so much, but what I would have done, I would have tried to get to the people who I thought were more flexible and try to, influence them to seeing things a little differently. As president right now, I am doing things a lot different. I mean, I'm a young Rotarian. My average age in the club is 60. 60-year-olds, they're used to doing something the same old way. I think Zoom forced them to come online, so they are learning Zoom, and some of them are really enjoying Zoom. I think I tried to show them that we are getting the same results here. We're saying the same thing, we're singing the same song, we're just doing it a little different. So give it a try. If it doesn't work out, we will go back, but I try to always ensure that whatever change I'm trying to influence, I ensure senior Rotarians are on board in that change. And I also ensure that I talk to a lot of people for support. So when you go into a situation where you want to make a change and break a habit, you have to do a lot of, should I say, campaigning in the background to get the buy-in from some other persons. And once you get that buy-in from people who the club respect, it is easy to get the club to change their habits.
So I would ask everyone at this point in time, firstly, I would like to thank you for your insightful presentation, Octavian Spencer. And as we come to a close at this time with this session, I ask everyone to return to the main room. Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you.